Welcome to Law and the Machine, where artificial intelligence meets the legal system, liability, regulation, intellectual property, and the government's uncomfortable role as both rulemaker and AI adopter. The law wasn't written for this.
There's a new kind of threat emerging in workplaces, one that can fundamentally distort reality and undermine trust in an instant. Imagine a deepfake video appearing online or shared internally showing a colleague doing or saying something utterly inappropriate, something that would normally lead to immediate termination or a serious harassment complaint.
And the critical detail here isn't just the existence of the deepfake, but the speed at which these things can proliferate. The challenge for employers and victims alike is what the paper refers to as the 48-hour takedown trap.
The 48-hour takedown trap. That phrase itself hints at a frantic race against the clock. Is that a formal legal deadline or something more insidious about the nature of how these deepfakes spread?
It's less a formal legal deadline and more a practical, existential problem for an organization. The clock starts ticking the moment a deepfake appears, especially one that depicts a Title VII violation, like sexual harassment or discrimination. Within 48 hours, that fabricated content can become widely disseminated, cause irreversible reputational damage, and create a hostile work environment, all before many traditional HR or legal responses can even properly begin to form.
So it's not just about the technical ability to create these synthetic realities, but the operational and legal paralysis that sets in when trying to respond to something that isn't real yet causes very real harm.
Exactly. The core tension is that existing legal frameworks, particularly employment laws like Title VII, were simply not designed for a world where images and audio can be perfectly faked to create a synthetic colleague engaging in misconduct.
That term, synthetic colleague, can be unpacked. It's chilling. It implies a deepfake isn't just an image or a video, but a fabricated persona engaging in workplace actions. How does that concept intersect with something as foundational as Title VII?
Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. It also covers harassment that creates a hostile work environment. Traditionally, proving a hostile work environment involves demonstrating severe or pervasive conduct that an employer either knew about or should have known about and failed to address. With a deepfake, the conduct itself is synthetic, but the impact on the workplace and the victim is very real.
So if a deepfake video shows a manager making racist comments or sexually harassing an employee, even if it's entirely fabricated, the emotional distress, the reputational damage, and the perceived hostile environment for other employees are all very tangible.
Precisely. The deepfake acts as a new vector for creating a hostile work environment. It bypasses the need for the individual to actually do or say the thing. The mere circulation of the deepfake, especially within the workplace or among colleagues, can meet the severe or pervasive standard for harassment. It raises fundamental questions about what constitutes conduct in an age of synthetic media. Is viewing a deepfake evidence of exposure to harassment? Is sharing it participation in harassment?
And what about the employer's responsibility? Under Title VII, employers have a duty to prevent and correct harassment. How does that duty extend to a deepfake that might have been created by an external actor or even an anonymous one, but still permeates the workplace culture?
That's where the legal landscape becomes incredibly murky. An employer's liability often hinges on whether they had knowledge of the harassment and failed to take prompt, appropriate corrective action. But with deepfakes, knowledge itself is complicated. Does an HR department need to be constantly monitoring the internet for deepfakes depicting their employees? What level of diligence is reasonable when the content might be hosted on platforms outside the employer's control?
It sounds like the burden of proof shifts, or at least the nature of it changes dramatically. It's no longer just about proving who did what, but also proving what is real. For an employer, that adds an entirely new layer of forensic investigation to an HR complaint.
Absolutely. Consider a traditional harassment complaint. HR would interview witnesses, review emails, security footage. Now, they might be faced with a highly convincing video or audio file that appears to be definitive proof of misconduct, but is in fact entirely fabricated. The immediate impulse might be to react to the deepfake as if it were real, especially given the pressure to act swiftly in harassment cases. But if they act on it without verification, they risk wrongful termination lawsuits. If they delay for verification, they risk a hostile work environment claim for inaction.
So the 48-hour takedown trap isn't just about getting the deepfake removed from the internet. It's also about the internal clock ticking for an employer to make a decision about disciplinary action or workplace policy, all while trying to determine the authenticity of the core evidence.
That's right. The trap has multiple jaws. On one side, platforms and content hosts are often slow to respond to takedown requests, especially if the content doesn't immediately violate their terms of service or if authenticity is disputed. On the other side, employers face immense pressure to address apparent misconduct quickly to avoid escalating a hostile work environment claim, but lack the tools or expertise to rapidly authenticate deepfakes. This puts them in an almost impossible position.
It's basically the equivalent of having to prove a negative in a crisis situation. One has to prove this didn't happen or that the evidence isn't real, while simultaneously trying to mitigate the damage caused by the fake evidence itself.
And the stakes are incredibly high. For the individual depicted in the deepfake, their career, reputation, and mental well-being can be irrevocably damaged. For the employer, the risks include Title VII liability, legal costs, reputational damage, and a breakdown of trust within the workforce.
This brings the discussion to the practical steps employers are supposed to take. What does prompt and appropriate corrective action even mean when the corrective action might involve trying to erase something from the internet that's designed to be indelible, or trying to convince an entire workforce that a video they saw is fake?
The immediate impulse might be to react to traditional HR and legal playbooks here. Prompt and appropriate for deepfakes likely needs to include immediate communication to the workforce, initiating a forensic investigation into authenticity, engaging legal counsel for potential defamation or privacy claims, and attempting content removal. But the critical point is that even with all these steps, the reputational and emotional harm can occur almost instantaneously. The correction is always playing catch-up.
So for employers, the emphasis has to shift dramatically towards prevention and proactive policy, rather than solely relying on reactive measures. What kinds of policies could even begin to address this?
Policies would need to be multifaceted. Firstly, clear guidelines on appropriate use of company systems and devices and strict prohibitions against creating or sharing deepfakes. Secondly, training for employees on identifying deepfakes and reporting them. Thirdly, robust internal investigation protocols that specifically account for synthetic media, potentially involving external forensic experts. And fourthly, a communication strategy for when a deepfake incident occurs, aiming to transparently address the issue while preserving the dignity of those involved.
But even with policies in place, the technical barrier to creating a deepfake is falling rapidly. It's becoming easier for anyone with a smartphone and a bit of malicious intent to generate convincing fakes. This isn't just about sophisticated state actors anymore.
That's a crucial point. The democratization of deepfake technology means the threat isn't just from a few highly skilled individuals. It could be a disgruntled employee, a former employee, or even someone completely external with a vendetta. The who becomes harder to pin down, and the how becomes increasingly simple. This complicates any attempt to attribute blame or even to understand the motive.
And the legal system itself has a speed problem. Lawsuits take time, investigations take time, injunctions take time, all while the deepfake continues to circulate. Is there any existing legal precedent or statute that could offer a quicker remedy, or is there a gaping hole in the law?
There are existing torts like defamation, invasion of privacy, or intentional infliction of emotional distress that victims could pursue. However, these are often slow, costly, and can be difficult to enforce against anonymous actors or across international borders. Some states are beginning to pass specific laws against deepfakes, particularly in election contexts, but workplace-specific legislation is still largely absent. This means employers and victims are often trying to fit a new digital problem into old analog legal boxes.
It sounds like the rapid evolution of this technology is creating a significant regulatory vacuum in the workplace. Is there a sense that legislators are even fully grasping the urgency of this specific threat, particularly as it relates to employer liability and Title VII?
The understanding is growing, but perhaps not at the pace of the technology itself. Much of the legislative focus on deepfakes has been around elections or child exploitation. The insidious impact on workplace dynamics, harassment, and employer liability under existing statutes is a newer, less explored area. There's a real need for clarity on what constitutes an employer's duty of care in this new environment. Without it, companies are navigating a legal minefield blindfolded.
So the 48-hour takedown trap isn't just about content removal. It's about the entire legal and HR ecosystem struggling to catch up with the speed and nature of synthetic harm.
Absolutely. It highlights a fundamental mismatch between the instantaneous, viral nature of deepfakes and the typically deliberate, evidence-based processes of HR investigations and legal proceedings.
This puts a huge emphasis on how employers update their policies and training. What's the most critical first step for an organization looking to protect itself and its employees from this kind of deepfake threat?
The most critical first step is simply acknowledging the threat. Many organizations might still view deepfakes as a distant, theoretical problem, but the paper makes clear this is a current and imminent HR and legal issue. This involves updating acceptable use policies, providing deepfake awareness training, and establishing clear internal reporting and investigative procedures that can distinguish between real and synthetic evidence.
And what about the platforms where these deepfakes might be hosted? Do they have a role to play in helping employers and victims navigate this 48-hour trap?
They absolutely do. While platforms have Section 230 immunity for content posted by users, the argument can be made that their content moderation policies, or lack thereof, directly contribute to the trap. Faster, more transparent takedown procedures for provably fake, harmful content would significantly alleviate the pressure on employers. Some platforms are starting to implement policies, but enforcement and speed remain inconsistent.
So, the synthetic colleague isn't just a technical marvel. It's a profound challenge to the very notion of truth and accountability in professional lives.
It forces a reconsideration of the evidentiary standards in employment law and the practical responsibilities of employers in maintaining a safe and respectful workplace when the reality itself can be manufactured.
This issue is a complex intersection of technology, law, and human behavior, and the implications for the future of work are significant. The core tension discussed today is that the speed of digital harm far outpaces the speed of legal and institutional response. Employers are caught in a difficult position, needing to act swiftly, but also needing to act judiciously, all while grappling with the fundamental question of authenticity.
And for individuals, the threat of having their digital identity weaponized against them in the workplace means a new layer of vulnerability that employment law is only beginning to grapple with.
So, 3 key insights for listeners from this discussion. First, deepfakes are not a futuristic problem. They are a present and immediate threat to workplace integrity and employee well-being, directly implicating existing employment laws like Title VII.
Second, the 48-hour takedown trap highlights the critical mismatch between the speed of digital dissemination and the often slow, deliberate processes of legal and HR remediation. Employers face immense pressure to respond quickly to apparent deepfake-driven misconduct, but risk severe consequences if they act without thorough authentication.
And third, current legal and HR frameworks are largely unprepared for this new class of digital harm. This necessitates a proactive shift towards robust preventative policies, sophisticated investigative capabilities, and a reevaluation of employer duties in an era where reality can be manufactured.
The broader question this raises for everyone is how trust can be built and a fair process maintained in workplaces when the very evidence of conduct can be expertly faked and spread globally in moments?
And what is the ethical and legal burden on platforms to help close this 48-hour window, rather than simply being passive conduits for potential harm?
That's all for Law and the Machine. Join us next time as we continue exploring where AI and the law collide. If you found this useful, subscribe. We appreciate it.
The law will catch up, eventually.